So I want to get the read from Ted Williams, the defense attorney, the former D.C. homicide detective, what he makes of this argument the prosecutor is making, that this storm got to the point that he did what he did, and he outlined the storm, but it dragged on a while, his trying to map that storm out for the jury. How do you think it went?
You know, Neil, I think Mr. Waters has put on a compelling case here for the prosecution here. He has laid out a roadmap for this jury to be able to follow. You know, you have to ask yourself, when is Alex Murdaugh lying? Well, I can tell you when he's lying, whenever his lips are moving. And I say that simply to say the testimony in this case has shown that in anything that Alex Murdaugh has said could be considered a liar. He himself, Alex Murdaugh, has admitted that he was a liar on the stand. And when you look at the fact that he says that he was not at the kennel, and then when they were able to show video of him being at the kennel with Maggie and Paul, all of a sudden when he testifies, he said, you know what? I lied to you. I was there, but I went back up to the house and I went to sleep. Or when you look at the timeline, it is no way that if he was at the kennel at 8:45 and we now see at 9:07 his car leaving Moselle, going to his mother's home who was ill, it tells you that Alex Murdaugh has just lied. He has been a web here. And I think Mr. Waters has walked right through his web of lies. And I think he's made at this stage a convincing argument to that jury that beyond a reasonable doubt, Alex Murdaugh murdered his wife and his child.
Well, let me pursue that. When you're talking about Creighton Waters, the prosecutor, he was arguing that all this evidence could only lead you to the conclusion that Murdaugh did do these killings. The defense has been arguing they don't add up that simply, that there possibly were two gunmen, two different guns, that we'll separately hear. But one of the things that struck me from Creighton Waters is after an exhaustive investigation, there was only one person who had the motive, who had the means, who had the opportunity to commit these crimes, and also whose guilty conduct after these crimes betrays him. But on the motive part, I'm not quite so convinced. And maybe you can help me with this, because I'm not nearly as smart at this stuff as you are. But it's ultimately something that jurors weigh more than anything else, the motive part. The motive part. What would it be here?
And Neil, that is the weakness, and you're absolutely right. The motive part in this case is terribly confusing, because think about it. What they're saying is that after they outed him, meaning Alex Murdaugh, early in the day of having stolen money from his law firm, 700 and some odd thousand at that stage, that all of a sudden he didn't want his family members, meaning Maggie and Paul, to know about this, and he was embarrassed by it, so he goes and kills them. That doesn't make any sense, because you would have to think for a second. Well, if you didn't want Maggie and Paul to know about it, wouldn't you not have wanted your other son, Buster, to also know about it? So therefore, it seems to me that when you look at the motive in this case, that it is all over the page. And I think that it is questionable, because guess what? He didn't kill Buster. If he killed anybody, he killed Maggie and Paul. And you would have thought that he would have also wanted to kill Buster as a part of this cover-up and this embarrassment of having stolen money. So the motive part of this is all over the page. And I think that the prosecution needs to understand that the jury, if there's anything in this case that is very weak for the prosecution, it is this motive part, this cockamamie story that he had this financial problem. And because he had this financial problem, he winds up killing his wife and his child, but he leaves one of them alive. It just doesn't, pass the smell test, Neil.
Yeah, it's the leaving one of them alive that raises doubts. All right, if you're going to try to deflect, I mean, deflect all the way, as brutal as that sounds. But another thing I wanted to raise with you, this lying thing, there's no doubt that Murdaugh has lied about a lot and taken it all back and sort of readjusted his story. Let's assume on all the embezzlement and the financial chicanery, he's looking at jail for the rest of his life. He's, 64 years old. That is very likely. So what is the upside here to denying a murder that is ultimately going to land you in jail for maybe more time, but you can't do more jail than jail for the rest of your life? That is assuming that all these other, illegal acts and financial, liabilities don't result in jail for the rest of your life. In other words, you have nothing to lose just saying, oh, the hell with it. I killed them too. But he is vociferously denying that. And even using, his defense lawyer to say, there might be other culprits here. There might be others who wanted to punish Murdaugh here and to kill his wife and son. I mean, what do you think of that, sort of backstory here?
Well, let me start with the financial crimes here. First of all, I believe that if Alex Murdaugh is found guilty of murdering his son and his wife, that this case will possibly be reversed or because the judge let in all of this financial crimes. If the judge, I thought, would have let in some of it, it would have been okay. But he apparently has made a calculated judgment, meaning Alex Murdaugh, that, hey, there's some way I can wiggle myself out of being in jail for the rest of my life for the financial crime, but there's no way whatsoever I can wiggle myself out of if I admit to having murdered my child and my wife. And I think that's what's weighing heavily on his mind. He's balanced that out, and he believes at some stage he will be able to get past this financial crime.
All right, because that then would be a separate trial, to your point. He also said that it was paranoia that really coming from the addiction to all these painkillers that made him forget what was going on or to do the inconsistent things he was doing. I don't know how some of that explains all the lying that he did, because almost everything he said ended up being a lie. But what do you think of that argument?
Well, think about it. If he was this paranoid and he was going in and out because of his drug addiction, how did he know, meaning Alex Murdaugh, that he didn't go down to that kennel and he didn't shoot and kill his wife and his child? If he was so paranoid and those kind of things were happening as a result of the drug addiction, it just does not pass the smell test, Neil. This guy, unfortunately, is a liar. The big question is, can the prosecution prove beyond a reasonable doubt to this jury that he has lied and that he is, in fact, the killer? And you just mentioned it, Neil. The defense in this case is going to come back and say, there were two killers. Guess what? Right. There were two different guns that were used in this killing. And as a result of that, we believe that it was more than one person who committed this crime. And if they can sow that seed of reasonable doubt in the minds of that jury, I think they would come back with a not guilty. But I am looking at more than anything else, either a guilty or hung jury in this case. But I do not see under any scenario or circumstances a complete not guilty.
So all you need is one juror who isn't quite convinced that any of this is there, either a motive or an explanation for the two guns being used and all of that. And then he's off. He's done. He's exonerated.
Well, no, not if one of the jurors. You do need a unanimous jury in this case. But if one of the jurors come back and hold this jury up, I can unequivocally tell you that I believe that it would be considered a hung jury and that this case clearly would be retried by those prosecutors down there. I don't think under any scenario, if it's a hung jury, that he's off the hook.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Ted Williams. If you can just stand by, my friend.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.